it's Amber. This channel is normally used for my music and music videos, but I thought I'd do something a bit different as, while that's a huge part of my life, there's something else that has also been a massive part of my life that I think I should by now share. I have a disorder called scoliosis that is quite often not known about. It's actually fairly common, especially with young adults, and when I was diagnosed I found out that there wasn't very many videos online about it, and if they were mainly young children or adults, and I didn't really fit into either of those categories. And so I wanted to make a video that was approachable for young adults and late teens and people that are generally worried about what is going to happen and what is this thing. If you're here because you've got scoliosis or it's a new diagnosis or whatever, then just know you're not on your own. But if you're here to learn more, then it's really great, and please share this to raise as much awareness as possible for this condition. So what is scoliosis? It is characterised as the abnormal twisting of the spine. So for me, this means that I've actually got 3 curves in my spine, both thoracic and lumbar, so that means top and bottom of your back. For other people, this could mean something very slight, as you could be rotated forward or sideways. It very much depends on the severity of your condition. This is noticed by having a visibly curved spine, which you'll even notice through actually seeing your body in a different posture. So for example, my shoulder drops, which I've got used to altering myself. You can also see it obviously in x-rays, which I'll come into a little bit later, as obviously unless you're having an x-ray for something, why would you know? You could have like a prominent rib cage, so because it's your spine, it connects to a lot of different things. So for me, my shoulder, my hip and my rib cage is affected, so your rib cage could stick out more or in more. One of your shoulders could be higher or lower than the other, and also the same with your legs. You could have one leg longer or shorter than the other. It doesn't mean the length of it is shorter, it means the placement of where your hip and shoulder are in a different place to what normal people would have. For me, one of the main reasons I realised it was actually my breathing problems. So I had childhood asthma, and for a long time, I'm a singer, and as you probably know from my channel, and I realised that my breathing was starting to deteriorate. I couldn't take in as much breath. I'd often have a cough a lot of the time, and so I went to the doctors about this, and they diagnosed me with asthma again, like I did as a child, and I'm still on inhalers, and they were quite high steroid based ones, which, you know, they do help, but that wasn't the main problem. It wasn't until I went on holiday in Spain, I must have been about 13, my shoulder, because I was in a swimming costume and I'm not kind of the person to kind of have my body out, they could see my shoulder. So my mum said to me, you know, how long has this been going on for? And I didn't know, quite frankly. You know, it's not the sort of thing you look at because you can't see yourself from behind. It wasn't until then that we thought, okay, this isn't normal. And I'd been complaining about back pain, which at that point, you're in school, you've started kind of doing lessons which you might need textbooks for, you're carrying a lot of things, and we put it down to just generally that. I also did a lot of horse riding and swimming and things like that. I was a fairly active person, and also doing dance meant that injuries were something you kind of get used to. You don't necessarily think they could be anything worse than, oh, I've just hurt it a little bit. It wasn't until I had a fall at school where I had to have an x-ray on my shoulder because it was causing me a lot of pain, that I noticed in the image that my spine was coming into my shoulder blade, and I queried it at the time, and the person, because they were only looking at my shoulder, said, you know, everything's perfectly fine in the x-ray, nothing to worry about. The next day I got a phone call, and my mum, my dad and myself, we went to the hospital, looked at this x-ray, and they said to us, I think you need to have another x-ray on your back, by the looks of this you've got scoliosis. At the time this didn't seem very scary because I didn't know what this was. For me, I thought, oh, okay, I'll be okay, you know, it's nothing to worry about. I then had further x-rays and MRIs, and to this date I've had so many that I genuinely couldn't tell you. From that, yeah, I found out I had 2 curves in my spine. And I was right in the middle of doing my GCSEs, kind of learning for them. I hadn't started them yet. And so I had a few options. I could either take some time off school, I could do my GCSEs, I could just wait and see what happens. I was then referred to the Royal National Orthopaedic Hospital at Stanmore, and we were waiting just to go there and for them to do a full assessment. In the meantime, I had been wearing a sling because of the problems with my shoulder, and this has caused me a lot of weakness in my arm, so this has made it very hard to regain that, which is another part of the condition. You know, there's a lot of different ways to treat it, and if you're not sure what it is, early diagnosis is the best thing, because Now I'm not only fighting the weakness because of the scoliosis, I'm having the weakness because of being in a sling for such a long time. I had this throughout my GCSEs, and when we had that appointment at Stanmore, they confirmed, yes, this is scoliosis, you've got 2 curves, and because of the degree of it, it meant that I had to have an operation. It was an emergency case, and, you know, trigger warning, if you don't want to hear this, then please just skip forward a few seconds. So I was being crushed by my rib cage, all my organs were being crushed, is the polite way of putting it, and this is why I had to have that operation. For some people, you can have scoliosis and it literally not affect you, or you might have a little bit of back pain which can be treated through physio, or as you're growing be treated through a brace, which I'll go into more later. But for me, it was kind of have this operation or continually get worse, and it didn't mean that having the operation would make things better, but it definitely was to stop it getting worse. Throughout my GCSEs, I really struggled, especially towards the end, in which I was given a separate room, only because the pain in my hip and my shoulder became so severe. For example, writing for a long amount of time would cause me pain, sitting for a long amount of time would cause me pain, and it also led me to have to stop doing PE and dance and the things that I loved because I just wasn't physically able. We then roll around to June time and I had my operation. I went up to the Royal National Orthopaedic. I was on the children's ward because I was 16, so I wasn't classed as a child and wasn't classed as an adult. But for me, this actually worked out really well because after my operation, when I was able to start moving about again, I was able to sit with the children that had had similar operations and make their days a bit better, which, to be honest, to not be alone when you're in hospital is the best thing. So, operation day. The night before, all I really remember was having cannulas put in my arm so that they could get me any medication very quickly. They did final x-rays, blood tests, all of that sort of thing you have in most operations. And me and my dad sat and watched Les Mis together with Haribo sweets, which I had to stop eating directly at midnight because you're not allowed to eat before an operation. And so that's pretty much it. I fell asleep, just finished my bag of Haribo, and Les Mis was great. So that's always a bonus. The next day, I was then told that the x-rays from the day before showed a 3rd curve in my spine. This was unexpected. I mean, we'd been looking forward to this day for a long time and nervously awaiting and anxious to know what was going to happen. I think understandably so. You know, you go in for any operation or treatment and it is nerve-wracking and it is scary, but that's okay. And with this new information, I asked to see the surgeon before I went in because I wanted to know what he was going to do. I had 2 options. I was either going to have metal rods, which is called spinal fusion, which is the surgery I now have, but it was whether I was going to have it from the bottom of my neck all the way down to my hip bone or not. And by doing that, I wouldn't be dancing again. For me, this was important. While this was really difficult, I knew I wanted to still have the career path that I'd decided on so many years ago when I was very small. And we went with the decision in the end to have the fusion only from about my bra strap down to my hips. So for girls, you kind of know where I'm talking about. Yes, this would mean I still have 1.5 curves in my spine. But the whole point of this operation wasn't to cure everything. It was to prevent it getting worse. And that curve in the middle was the one that was causing me so many medical problems. It's unbelievable. So we come to the operation. I go in with these wonderful gown on your socks so you don't end up getting bad circulation, all these amazing things. And they do the traditional, that you're taken down, and if you've been to the hospital in the UK, you kind of go through like army looking barracks. I went outside on the hospital bed, it was raining, to go into the operation theatre, completely mad. And my dad said to me, when you wake up, what do you want? Now, I don't eat meat, but apparently at the time I said that I wanted a bacon sandwich. So that is what my dad brought me when I came to, and I wasn't allowed to eat it, so he did. As we were saying goodbye, my mum stayed outside the room because, you know, obviously it's quite upsetting to see your child go into an operation theatre. And my dad was there with me. And he started to cry and I was like, Dad, I'll be fine. Obviously I was high on medication, I'm not going to lie. You know, morphine is a wonderful thing. And as I was counting down from 10 to 1, I still hadn't fallen asleep. And that was obviously because I was trying to reassure my dad that I'd be okay. So finally the anaesthetic set in and I genuinely don't remember any of the operation, so that's always a plus. So after the operation, I was brought to, and my friend had actually, who I'd met in hospital, had actually had the same operation as me at the same time, but in 2 different theatres. So we woke up next to each other and we were both kind of making no sense, but all I remember is the nurse that brought me to was called Dorothy, and I actually turned around and said to her, "Are you from Oz?" Which, if you know Wizard of Oz, makes a lot of sense, but I wasn't making much sense. I was taken into this place which I now know is intensive care, but at the time I thought was a spaceship because all the doors opened automatically and it looked like a giant white egg in my brain. And so I heard Starman by David Bowie, and anyone who knows me knows I'm a huge fan, and I sang that the top of my lungs the second I came to, and they were saying, you know, she should be falling asleep any minute, you know, she's just a bit delirious. Oh no, I stayed awake that whole night. And I was singing, there was Mark Bolan on the TV, God knows what this programme was. I was having so much fun. And my dad said, "Do you want the bacon sandwich?" And I just looked at him and I was like, no, not really. It was cold and disgusting. But I did want flapjack. So my mum had to go and buy me some flapjack, which apparently after an operation you're not supposed to be that hungry, but I certainly was. And eventually, the day later, once I was taken back to the ward I'd started in, I did fall asleep. And the next couple of days I was pretty much asleep. I had to be made to lay in bed for all the day. I couldn't get up. I wasn't allowed to move. If I wanted to be moved about, then I had to get a nurse to come and get me, so I had like a button to push. I couldn't do anything for myself. And that's hard. It is really difficult. And, you know, before the operation I was told that I might never walk again. I might never move my arms again. I might never move my neck, my face, my legs, anything. And, you know, that's varying degrees of severity. I could have just been able to not move one arm, both arms, you don't know. There's another thing, because you're face down for the operation, since it's on your back, I could have gone blind or deaf, and that's kind of, I don't know the medical side of it, but there is a lot of risks. However, I was fine. You know, they did all the tests, I can move my feet, I can move my hands, and it is a very slim chance that any of these things are going to happen. But I'm glad they told me as a precaution, as it is important to know these things before you go into it. So recovery. I spent several days just laying there. Then one day the OT came in, sorry, that's occupational therapist. The occupational therapist came in and she said, "Should we try and sit you up then?" And I thought, great, yeah, let's do that. So you use the bed to help you sit up. They've got buttons, as you've all probably seen in cartoons, where you get squashed in the middle. And I managed to sit up. But not just sit up, hold myself up, which was difficult and exhausting. For day 1 of recovery, after a few days of rest, that's all I did. Because that wasn't day 1 after my operation. So, the next day of recovery, I was then made to stand up, which, I'm not gonna lie, was better than any roller coaster or night out I've ever had, because I felt invincible. I stood up and promptly collapsed, but I just felt so tall. I'd actually gained 2 inches of height from the operation. So I stood up and felt like I was on stilts and just fell flat on my face. But it was wonderful and I did it, and that's what mattered. So the next day, taking baby steps. Started walking, and this was with someone on my arm and very slow, and I wouldn't really call it walking. It's kind of that shuffle you see babies doing when they've just learnt to kind of hold their own weight up. And I'm not going to go into every single day after this, but progressively I started being able to walk again. I have learnt how to walk again. And this is something surprisingly a lot of people have had to learn to do, but it's still something really scary to think about, but achievable. Don't get me wrong, you know, I'm not perfect now. My walking is still all over the place and some days are better than others. But those few days, and the first video I have of myself smiling at the camera, standing up, pure gold, you know, there's no other feeling like it. So a couple of days later, I ended up being able to go to the children's ward, the really small children, and I sat and did some colouring with them, and to be honest, they offered me a job working there as like a helper or whatever as a joke, but it was a nice feeling because it felt like I'd actually been able to become myself again. I could talk to other people, I could move about, I could do something, which was something I'd spent many days not being able to do. So the day came where the surgeon came round to see me, and Dorothy, who remembered me saying, "Is she from Oz?" which was lovely. And at this point I'd been in hospital just under 2 weeks, which is about average, as it will take you a further 8 weeks after that for full recovery. And I mean, full recovery doesn't mean you're going to be back to your normal self. The main reason I wasn't allowed to go home is because I hadn't, as they say, passed my bowels. And this is because the medication you're on, it stops all your bodily processes, obviously because you can't go to the toilet, you can't leave your bed. And if you want the brutal, honest details, you know, you've got a catheter in. Google it if you don't know what it is, because I'm not going into that. Being a girl, you have to have nurses clean you. Your time of the month happens, girls. It's not nice, but it happens, and you're on a ward with all girls. You're all going to have it together. You're all in that moment. It's disgusting. But I wanted to go home, and I was told for a couple of days that I couldn't because my body wasn't back to that function. So it came to the weekend, and I felt like I had two choices. Either my body was going to sort itself out here or sort itself out at home. The doctor said to me, maybe if you're at home you'll feel more comfortable and it might help. So I got up with help, and one of the nurses took me in a wheelchair and got me showered, which was so nice. I mean, after an operation there was nothing better than being able to wash your hair for the first time in 2 weeks. I felt like I'd been at a festival, but not a nice one. So I was then able to leave. On the car on the way home, I'm already a travel sick person, and with all those drugs in me, I pretty much fell asleep and threw up for the whole thing. I've got to bear in mind the hospital was about 4 hours away from my home, so it wasn't an easy journey to do. But going home and seeing my dog and being able to lay on the sofa was so nice. The sofa became my bed for about 6 weeks because I couldn't move. And during that time, it's important to let yourself get up, go and make a drink, do the things that you can do. You know, don't push yourself too much, but keep yourself moving, otherwise all the work you've been doing will go to waste. So my bodily functions still weren't working. I was in hospital 3 times within the first 2 weeks of being home because I couldn't go to the bathroom, as horrible as that sounds. And apparently it's quite normal after an operation, but this made me so unwell. It meant that all the drugs I was taking were staying in my body, they were making me very sick, and the fact that I couldn't move meant that you wouldn't believe how hard it is to be sick when you can't move. I mean, you can't move your top part of your body, and so little things like that became so difficult. However, you know, it took about 3 weeks and I was almost back to the point where I felt like me again. I went to college during this time and I started doing a drama course. Don't be wrong, it wasn't easy. The first show I did, I've got memories of standing on a chair and just doing this for the whole thing because I couldn't dance at that point. You know, I'd do what I could. I couldn't sit on the floor, I had to sit on a chair. There's lots of little things that I had to get used to, and I was very lucky. I've got to say, the whole team at the college I went to really supported me with even silly little things like letting me put all my stuff in an office so that I didn't have to carry it all the time, or putting it in a locker. They were there for me, and I felt like it was adapted so that I was able to feel as equal as everyone else. And if you don't have that experience, then you need to find a way to get it, because that's what you deserve. You know, it's not making you any less of a person. It doesn't mean you can't achieve something. It just makes it a little bit more difficult. Even now, I'd say I'm not back to normal. I spend my life adapting things, and that's fine. That's completely okay. 1 year after my operation, I went back and all my symptoms were the same as before. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't getting any worse, and that is what the operation was meant to do. But even to this day, my shoulder and hip are causing me a significant amount of issues. I was put in a body brace, which I'll insert a picture of. I was put in a body brace. You can't see it very clearly, but it's made out of plastic, and it was kind of, imagine a Victorian corset, but highly uncomfortable. You had to have it done up at the back by someone else. I couldn't do it myself. And the idea of this is many people are given it so that as they grow, it straightens their spine for them. Unfortunately, this was too late for me, as my spine had already stopped growing. But in reality, you know, I'm glad I had this experience, no matter how difficult wearing this thing for 23 hours a day was, and you kind of have that expression of an hour for a shower and all of this, and it was hard because, you know, it's the sort of thing, that really sticks out. People notice your disability. But for me, I felt like I needed to try something other than just an operation to fix it, because it wasn't getting any better. So this part is kind of for people that are in the situation of having the brace. It's hard to find clothes to fit. You have to upsize your clothes and downsize your clothes, because you have to wear something underneath the brace so that it doesn't rub and cut you and bruise you, which I've had, but also something over top of it if you want to hide it. So I've got some pictures here of ideas for what to wear. So I quite often, just for ease, I stayed in leggings, because obviously it comes down quite low, and if you've got jeans buckles or buttons or whatever, it does press against it, and that's quite painful. So leggings mean you can put them either underneath or over the top. So I used to wear kind of, for example, a long top underneath, leggings over the top to hide some of the brace, and a baggy top over the top, or even a fitted top over the top, and then a cardigan, because the fitted top kind of, using the brace gives you a nice figure, but then hiding it from the back with a cardigan means not everyone has to see it. So there is lots of different ways of dealing with it. You know, you can choose the design on it, as you probably saw with mine, make it your own, wear it as an accessory if you want to, be brave about it. But if you want to hide it, you just have to be smart with the way you dress, and if anyone wants me to do a proper video on that, I'm fine to do so. I just want this to be kind of a general bits and pieces about scoliosis. So today, I'm no longer in my brace 23 hours a day. I do still have that brace, and I've had various therapies. I've had physiotherapy, hydrotherapy, I've had acupuncture, I've had ultrasound, I've had all sorts of things to try and solve my problems, and my hip, my shoulder and my back are still a huge issue in my life. People don't look at me and think, oh, she's disabled, but I am, and that's with any disability, especially hidden ones. It's not easy, and there is so many things that I can't do. You've also got to remember, when you look at someone, they've got a best day, which I could feel invincible, and a worst day where I can't move. That's the reality of it. And if you're going to have an operation like this and expect miracles to happen, that's not how it works. You know, you've got to take every little thing as an achievement and keep being strong and working at it. I've not given up, you know, I might never be back to normality, but where's the fun in that, you know? That's not who I am. And I thought I would just kind of end the video with some things that I've actually achieved since getting scoliosis, and I think it shows that you can have whatever disability or illness and still achieve things. I mean, I've done my GCSEs, my A-levels, I've had jobs, you know, I'm not out there bricklaying or anything like that, but I'm working. I've done my Duke of Edinburgh, I've done my grade 8 in singing. I've been to Italy on holiday. I never thought I'd be able to go away somewhere because I didn't think I could cope with the plane journey or cope with sleeping in another bed or walking about as much. I've learnt to walk again. I've learnt how to use my arms again. I've learnt how to do everything. And that's hard. You wouldn't believe how many little things are really affected by this. But you might have scoliosis. Anyone can get it. And for me, I don't know the cause. And this could mean a big thing for my future. I don't know if my kids will get it. I don't know what the future will bring, and that's scary. But know that if you're in the same situation, I understand, and it is tough, but it doesn't mean that you've got to stop your life now and keep going with what you love, because I'm a living, breathing example. I'm still going, and I'm not some hero, or I'm not one of these people you need to look up to because of it. I'm just a person that it's happened to, and I understand it, and I wanted to make this so that instead of just spending my time putting videos of me singing, which, you know, cheeky little plug, if you want to go and give a like or whatever, I'd appreciate, but if you want to do anything, share this video and just make people aware of what scoliosis is, but also it's not the end of the world, no matter how hard it is. And if you've got an invisible illness, well, I get you, it's hard. But just be honest with people, ask for help when you need it, and just remember to keep living on. Love and peace. Thanks. Done.
Woot.
She couldn't make it this year because she was in hospital and she's still recovering. But I'd like to give her a hand and invite her up to come and sing with us.
Bear with me, I can't move around much, so just, yeah, have a go.
your ghost again, but that's not unusual. It's just that the moon is full and you decided to call. Well, here I sit, hand on the telephone, hearing the voice I know a couple of light years ago, heading straight for the fall. Well, we both know what memories can bring. They bring diamonds and rust. Well, we both know what memories can bring. They bring diamonds and rust. Well, I see you going around with snow in your hair, as we're looking out the window of a crummy hotel over Washington Square. Your breath comes in white clouds, mingles and hangs in the air. Speaking strictly for me, we both could have died then and there.